And do you want to do a roll call?
Amagashi,
Here.
Cleary,
Here.
Gorman,
Here.
Maldonado,
Here.
McKee, Mertens,
Here.
Perry,
Here.
Shiming.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Just for clarification, who's in the chambers with you? I didn't hear anybody.
Shimming.
Okay. Great. So, do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes from March 14th meeting?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Did you get that?
What's happening to your stuff?
Yep, I have a motion by Shiming, second by Maldonado.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Public appearance is not on the agenda.
None.
Okay. Resolution ordin, did you say something? Okay, so next up is, resolution ordinances, multifamily update from, Jack Pearson, the Fitchburg building inspection. And, yeah, he's gonna do an overview of the multifamily, in Fitchburg and, yeah, condition update. So we'll turn it over to you, Jack. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Am I on speaker here where everybody can hear me through this?
Yes.
All right, so, because I don't see anybody on my screen. Chad, can I fix that so I can see that too? That way I. Mhm. Yeah.
And while we're waiting for Jack to get fully set up here, one of the items referenced in our housing report from 2019 was not only a focus on ownership, which we're working right now on the rent-to-own ownership program, but also how do we kind of look at that multifamily housing stock that developed when we were still a town, which we have a significant amount of that property. And Jack is really our resident expert as far as our boots on the ground, going through those properties on a regular basis and working with those property owners. So we thought getting his perspective and overview on kind of the 30,000 foot level of our multifamily housing stock and predominantly that older housing that's been established in Fitchburg for a while would be helpful as this group maybe thinks about future programs that we may look to establish to kind of upgrade and enhance or maybe renovate to and or redevelop some of our older multifamily housing stock. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jack.
Actually, before we start, Jack, just so you know, at the council chambers, we're getting some, every once in a while, we're getting some feedback where your word repeats like 10 times. So it steps on the top of the next sentence. I'll just wave my hand when it happens because we don't always get full information. And then the other question is, should we wait till the end to ask questions of you, Jack, or can we interrupt if we have questions?
I've got kind of a slide that just says question and comments at the end of the presentation.
Okay.
It's fairly short. It's probably about 10 or 12 slides with some photos and a few graphs. Quickly about myself, my name is Jack Pearson. I've been with the building inspection. Well, technically, I started with the police department back in 2000. I've been with the city for 22 years. I was down there as kind of a part-time position, or a split position actually, with the police department and building inspection for about 3 years until, you know, as the city grew, we kind of branched off into full-time positions. I must add, I was a civilian position downstairs, so it was parking monitor and a little bit of everything. So, but that was kind of the route I was going, was to get into law enforcement personnel, but life changed. So anyways, from apartment complex, I mean, I've been doing this for, like I said, 22 years, and as we all know, we have a aging housing stock that's, you know, and some of that was 30 years old when I started here. It's now 50 years old, and We've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly in all facets of apartment rentals and landlord-tenant stuff. And I'm a strong advocate for tenants, but we have to be fair to the landlords too, to make sure things are done correctly and within the limits. So I'll figure out how to do this with the City of Fitchburg Housing Report, just kind of the main page there. And what I kind of did here, if I can do it, hang on. Is my video on or no?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can see your presentation.
Okay, can you see me? Or you don't need to? So, you don't need to see me.
It's either one or the other, for
Yeah.
whatever reason.
Okay. So this here is an overview of, I kind of pulled it from the zoning map over here, and I don't, I'm trying to point over in some of these areas. And this basically goes down, it's primarily all the apartment rentals in Fitchburg. At the bottom of the screen there, that road that runs left to right, the small white line is actually Adams Road. And then everything north in the dark blue over there, whoops, I got to go back here. What'd I do? Sorry about that, guys. So in the dark blue, that's all the kind of the new development over there in Terra Vesta and along South Cyene Road and a lot of, Lacey Road and Haight Farm and stuff. And there's been a lot of apartments built over there in the last, 7 years approximately. And then as
Jack,
we get,
can you hit the slideshow?
Yep, hang on.
Above, so
Fair.
we can, it'll make it larger.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm new at this. Give me a break.
Oh, no, you're doing fine. You're doing great. Thank you.
All right, so I want to do, we got to do,
Oh, now I can see you. I can see you and the presentation.
well, geez, it's just getting better as we go. We might actually be out of here by 6:30, I'm telling you. Now where'd the screen go?
All you have to do is hit slideshow.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, stop sharing. Sorry, guys. There we go. Are we better?
Can't see it.
All right.
We can't see your presentation, but we can see you.
We're going to have fun with this. How about now?
Call the technical people.
Chad.
That's it.
Well, I've got it. It's presenting. There's
So
sharing.
we got you.
There we go.
I'll send it out tomorrow.
We see you. We see you. We don't see you. now.
Voice.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. We're back. Are we?
Nope.
We're close. Chad, you want to hold my hand over here? And then we want to go to present.
There we go. Then let's
Oh.
go to slideshow.
There we go.
Okay.
I'm afraid to touch anything now, I'm telling you.
That's smart.
Well, thank you, Godwin. So as I was saying, the dark blues is kind of that Lacey Road, Terra Vesta, with the developments over there and some multifamily and more going up. And as we get to the very top in the center of the screen, that's up kind of that fish hatchery corridor where we just had Terrace Point was built. And then we have several multifamilies being, 8, 16, and 20 units up on the Greenway, Cohol, Pike Drive area, which is an aging complex. We've had a couple remodels there done over the last, one was about 4 years ago, and I think the other one it's probably been 10 years already, and that was, kind of carpeting, paint, cabinetry, so on and so forth. There's been some upgrades there, so.
And what colors are you asking us to look at right now?
The very top of the screen right up there where it'd be the yellows and the purples right about in the center of the,
Okay.
yep, towards the top. So that road that veers up, that's that whole fish hatchery corridor that goes up there. So we have all those apartments there, plus the view. And if you go down just a little bit into the greens, we got the Nine Springs area, and that's where the Pines, the Fairways, and the senior housing is. So that's kind of the primary influx on the north end and the west end. And then if you go over to the far left, where the red is, yeah, that might help actually. Yeah. So where the red is, that's kind of that Verona Road, and just to the left, a small where the yellow and the red is, that's mostly new fountains, and then we have some 4 units there, and a few other complexes there. And I think even new fountains is probably getting to be, yeah, probably 40 years old, if not older. I want to say it was built in 79, if my tells me right. So that's just kind of, everything that's, yeah, you can kind of see my pointer there, though, because Chad helped me out again here. So that's the main primary area for all the apartments is basically the northern, eastern, and western tier of the city, kind of north of Lacey Road, per se. So what I talked to assessing the other day and stuff, and so what we have right now, according to their records, is we have a total of 7,748 rental units. That also includes the duplexes, and she added in a couple mother-in-law dwellings and the likes for that. And, we threw them in the totals, but they don't really count for what this is here and stuff. So we have that, and then this is kind of the condition report that assessing also has too, and and this is units, so it's actually per building, and there's a total of, I think it was 936 there, and they use a definition here, the consideration, desirability, and usefulness of a building, and a lot of that's ranked on location, services that are rendered, and the actual age status of the building and stuff. And a good 721 units, which is right around that 90 percentile mark, are in average, and then we got the good or better 96. So overall, it's pretty good in the city of Fitchburg as far as from an assessing standpoint and the the structures of those buildings. We got 118 units that are valued at fair or less, and I believe there's a couple in poor condition too as well. I just didn't throw that word in there. So interesting enough, I pulled the permits, and this is how many living units have been added annually since 2000, which is the year I started, and I thought it was kind of a good show on the 21st century too, and how things have changed over the last 2 decades, basically. And if I highlight these, I mean, the 2000, it was like 198. And when I say living units, that means studios, 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms. And I mean, so if it's a 60 unit, that would count as a 60 units, for the permits, and not 200 buildings per se. So, and there's kind of a range there, as you can see, from 2000 all the way up through about 2006, and everybody knows whoops, sorry about that. Oh, I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Sorry about that. So, of course, we had the crash in 2008 technically, and you could see the units, and they were down to, I think there was 41 only built in 2010, and 2008.
Slideshow, please.
Sorry?
Hit slideshow,
Oh,
please.
sorry.
No problem.
Is that under present again there?
No, just go to slideshow. There you go, that's fine.
All right. I'm going to practice at this. I'm coming back.
All right.
So there we go. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. So as you can see, from 2015 up until 2021 is when things really kind of started booming up here, when we were getting into the, the 450 units. And I believe a lot of that was probably, could have been when the View was built in that time frame along Post Road, and then a few others there that were going up. And then it kind of dropped down to about the 150s in 2016 and 17. And then it's just kind of skyrocketed for how many units we've had here. And you can see in 2020, we obviously had 700 and, I think it was 738 was the total number of units that were put here in the city. So I mean.
Jack, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you.
Absolutely.
Joe has a question, and I know he has to leave early today.
Okay, sure.
So, Joe, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. Is it appropriate to ask where most of the units that were rated as poor were located? I think I have a sense, and I don't necessarily want to put any, landlords on blast, but I've seen some apartments that are in pretty rough condition.
Yeah, I don't so much, Joe, have that information right offhand because it comes from the assessing department, but just based on my own experience, the worst places that we're seeing as far as conditions and substandard housing would be up in the Belmar area. There's a few select buildings over there, not all of them, but a few. And not too much on the Jamestown side, except for there is one stretch of area over there on some smaller units that are in desperate need of repair. And then I would say on the north end too, the Pike, Coho, Greenway, that area and stuff. And I thought long and hard about this, and I've talked to Mike and Joyce too, and we really don't want to point out any, we don't want to point fingers and say this one's great and this one's bad, in this context right now. It's something that could be had for a discussion later, I'm sure, but we try not to even put any photos out there for identifiers or anything because we didn't really want to stigmatize anybody anywheres.
And one follow-up question. What are the standards for what lists somebody as poor condition, and what are the primary kind of features that you've seen in places that are in poor condition?
Well, historically speaking, basically it's the older carpeting, it's the older cabinetry, the appliances are outdated or don't function 100% like they should, whether it's the stoves, refrigerators, AC units, or wall units, which aren't, economically, good for tenants. And we know that, they're kind of on a lower income base, but yet the price points are getting out of control even for those, run-of-the-mill places. And we're not seeing the upgrades that I guess that we would all ask to have, And the concerning point from my standpoint is, when we had these slower years for construction in 2007 through 2012, essentially, we tried to take a more proactive approach towards knocking on doors and saying, hey, do you have any problems, and checking out common areas and basements and all that stuff. And we got a little busier. We lost a staff member. And then to top things off, I believe it was in 2016, it was, I think, Act 270 from the state government that really started kind of restricting what we can and can't do from a proactive approach. We almost had to have a complaint either from a tenant or the landlord itself. And then if we did not find anything, we couldn't really go back and just keep revisiting it as we had in the past because management companies and ownership groups here were starting to realize that Fitchburg had a reputation, and what we perceived to be a good reputation is that we were not going to allow people to live in squalor, regardless what your age, race, location, or anything else was. You deserve. We all breathe the same air, basically, was our effect, and that everybody deserves to be treated equally. And so we made sure we enforced that, and it's been a little bit more difficult here recently.
So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, and Godwin,
Just a simple question.
yeah.
I noticed the 2020 figures. Is that generically in Fitchburg, or this is the result of the Terra Villa development?
For 2020, I think that was a combination of the senior housing went up in 2020. Mike, was that correct? Mm-hmm. So we had, I believe it was 160 units there. We had Terrace Point, which was on that permitting process at that point. There was another 190. So there's 350 right there. And then we had a couple more over on, I believe it was Fiedler, built 2 or 3 more buildings at Aurora at the corner of Lacey and South Seminole. So, and then we've got, help me out here. Yep. Yeah, the Lafayette, so all that over there too. So yeah, 2020 it looks extreme, but it was real.
Pandemic year, I'm surprised at that.
Yeah, and I mean we've got I think there's another 189 unit going up currently under construction. Just started footing and foundations, and we've got 2 or 3 more in the works that either have already been passed or are moving forward. So we're going to probably see those numbers again here in 2022 and part of 2023.
Okay,
Jack?
Thank you, thank you.
thank you.
Joe, I'm just gonna help Jack out a little bit here, because he's maybe just not real familiar with the assessing end of it. Condition, desirability, and utility. So if it's really based upon how it is in relationship to its age. So does it show excessive wear, or is it typical for its age? That's how you look at that CDU back from my assessing days. So just wanted to maybe help Jack out a little bit, since he's probably not real familiar on how that's rated. So it's a condition, desirability, and utility, and it's how it sits in relationship to its age. So if it had a poor rating, it probably shows more excessive wear than what's typical for that age. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't mastered that department yet. I'm working on that too, so I'm kidding, so.
Sorry, can I ask one more question before
Yeah.
I duck out?
Yeah,
Do any of the apartments show signs of hazards, like this is wrong with it and it's actually causing a safety concern, whether it be, something that's, could be flammable, something where it's like, the doors don't secure and people can't, people can get in when they usually couldn't have been able to get in, or any other types of features like that?
Well, that's a tough one, Joe. There's a lot of variables that play into that when you get into life and safety stuff. And, there's several buildings. And I wouldn't say so much life and safety, but with the older buildings, you don't necessarily, and, we had the issue over on Red Arrow Trail here a few weeks ago, unfortunately. And, they don't have the sprinkler systems and the upgraded fire alarms. But what I'm also seeing is more of the mom and pop operations are not keeping their, fire alarms up to date. They don't have sprinkler systems in there. The exit lights might not function. So, and the fire department goes through all these units, should be on the older buildings at least twice a year. And so they're catching that stuff as they move along too, and writing orders up. And there again, it's a little bit of a staffing and trying to get back to these places on a regular basis, unless it's, exigent circumstances is probably a good way to follow things up. Because if we see something that's life safety, like imminent, we'll give them 24 hours, if not less, in some cases, to get things operational, or have them take proper steps to ensure that the resident safety is, at most importance there. But more from our standpoint, it's it's ripped carpeting and windows that don't seal well and stuff, and security lock doors that may not function, and the likes of that. So from the outside, aesthetic appearances, and from the inside, just the age of everything that's in there.
Thanks, Jack. Everybody, I've got to head out, but great discussion. I'll catch up once the recording's out.
Thank you. Shall we continue?
Sure.
Okay. So we got the living units there, and I know I'm going to screw this up again. Haha, look at that. So excuse me, I did throw the Town of Madison annexation, which were taking place October 31st of this year. And really, that's going to be just that, kind of that light green area underneath the blue up there is going to be our triangle per se. But, with that being said, and I don't know the history of that housing over there yet as far as the age and conditions of them, but I know that we're going to be obtaining another I believe it's around 850 units for more rental property over there. So, it's going to put us up, we'll be well over 9,000 once some of this new stuff is built and with the annexation. So, and it's going to be a kind of a training situation for management and ownership groups over there because I don't think they're going to be acclimated to the, our expectations as the city of Fitchburg and our own department here. Because we don't say no lightly, and we do follow up and make sure that things are done, you know, in a reasonable fashion, and hopefully we don't get any pushback because it just makes for a bigger headache for the property owners and managers in the long run when it comes down to it. But you know, we try to be civil with everybody and, you know, gain compliance through, you know, friendly faces and, you know, common sense is what works.
What, as you bring in all these units, I assume with the town of Madison, they have some sort of inspection or some sort of contracted inspection, or how do they do it now?
They do not. They do not. And that's what happens with a lot of these smaller communities, you know, and it could even be Verona, Cottage Grove, Deerfield, you know, they don't really have a fallback on it. And that's kind of a statewide problem. You know, I think we're unique, kind of along with the city of Madison, to have property maintenance, building inspection, code enforcement to maintain a healthy and safe environment. And a lot of these other, you get out into the counties, you know, if there's rentals in the counties or the smaller municipalities, basically they have to kind of fall back at the county health level, and they really can only enact like the state codes under ATCP 134, which is Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, you know, and then the 704, but there's nobody to just stay on one spot. So landlords get away with a lot more outside of our area than they will here.
So without having to get into the weeds with it, what's kind of your sense of how that proceeds in terms of this coming under our jurisdiction now?
Well, I know we're doing a lot of outreach and stuff here, and I think as we progress here, and we've already had a couple meet and greets there, one with the residents, you know, which I didn't attend, my supervisor was there, and then we had the business one. But I think we want to get some information out there, and I know the administrative, you know, Lisa in that office is going to have some outreach appointments there too, and we're going to try to get some flyers out, you know, just what can the tenants expect, you know, from our department, and so on and so forth, and landlord, what our expectations are of them as well. I'll backtrack on that a little bit because there are expectations of the tenants as well to maintain their units within a, you know, they're again healthy and safe environment. So yeah, and
It's a challenge. I assume this is going to be a challenge.
oh, absolutely, yeah, gotta love a good challenge. So
Okay, sorry to interrupt. I just
No,
you
that's
got me
no,
thinking about it because of the number.
right, it's a good question, and you know, as time permits, or even on my way home, I've sometimes driven by there just to kind of get a visual from the outside and kind of get a feel for a good approach on that. So, you know, but it will be a work in the progress. But the sooner we can get on it, the better off we are.
Thank you.
So.
Thanks, Jack. Okay, let's try and hold all questions till the end. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, I've just got about 8 or 10 pictures here, and I didn't want to put any identifiers out here. And this is stuff. Some of this has even been three or 4 years ago, you know. But these are units, you know, like you can kind of see, you know, like right. I don't know if you can see. I mean, there's a sprinkler head there, and this particular unit, you know, when it's sprinklered, it's only sprinklered within the common hallways and down in the basement area. But the individual units are not sprinklered, you know, and they didn't need to be back when these buildings were built. So, I mean, it's a nice feature to have, but, you know, but as you can see, this particular unit, you know, the smoke alarm, and that was like that, and there was a few times of telling this person to get it fixed and so on and so forth. And that's the stuff we're seeing, not everywhere, but we shouldn't see that at all. The owner or manager of any of these units, you know, citywide, should be addressing these issues as they see them or as they're being made aware of them, you know, because that's a life and safety thing and stuff like that, you know. And then down below, you know, to the right, the next picture, I mean, that's just a little hallway that's down in a basement of I believe it's a 4-unit apartment. And we see a lot of this in the older housing with junk and debris and tires. And if you look real close, that door actually has a wooden block on it, and I believe it's nailed shut. And this is exit door to the outside, because the only other exit would be to go back upstairs in case of a fire, which is a definite no-no if something were to happen down there. So, I mean, that's the stuff that we see, and it's uncalled for. You know, it's uncalled for from anybody to allow that to happen, you know, all because they're on the cheap, or they just don't have the money to fix, or whatever the case may be. And it's unfortunate for the tenants, just, you know, because, and I won't name any buildings, but there's some that they're happy to have a roof over their head, and they get into these buildings because they may have been homeless in prior or whatever. And so they won't complain because they don't want to be put back out on the street, or their fear of retaliation, or whatever the case may be. But they're getting locked into these places where they can't afford to get out, because the price points on these are, you know, in the $950 to $1,000 range. And then on top of it, you pay all the utilities in a not a very energy efficient building. And, you know, they're all of a sudden they're at $1,300 or $1,400 a month for excuse my language, crap. So we'll go to so this is a different door here, but there again, you can see up there, you know, this is drywall and stuff that's coming down. It looks like it might even been plastic at one time. Exit light's not working. There again, down in the basement, blocked by a pallet, so on and so forth. The one to the right, and we see a lot of these in the older apartment complexes, is kind of the rotting wood. This is a deck, by the way, that people go out to, you know, and there's just, fix them, you know. I mean, you can sometimes scissor those up, which means just putting another board up there and running it into the building, you know, to secure them. But, and, you know, that's just one shot of that deck, and it was kind of like that on the edges and on the front of it, too. Unfortunately, I think we've only had one deck collapse in the history that I've been here, and that's because the guy shook the rug too hard from the second floor and fell over the railing. So, this is these are actually over in the Belmar neighborhood. I won't pinpoint the address, and you know, but this is carpeting, which is not kosher to be ripped for kids or anybody else to go up and downstairs with that type of carpeting. And this, you can even see a couple more spots up there where it's kind of here and even there too, you know. And it's a quick fix, but it just stays there unless we see it or somebody calls us about it. We don't know about this stuff, and that's the unfortunate, you know, thing in today's society. And that's a hallway, and that's got mold in it, you know, right through here and stuff. And so obviously that's been wet at some point, or there's water leaking behind the wall. You know, there's a variety of ways that could have occurred. And I think these are the last two. And this is real. This is a bathroom. Don't know what that stuff is or why it's there or anything else, but I kind of put it in there for special effects, but when you look at this tiling and stuff, that's clearly from the 70s, and you can kind of see the stains up there on the bathtub. And we've seen a lot of this over the years, and you know, and there again, these are the tenants that get into these units, and it's a roof over their head, and they don't want to complain for fear of retaliation or because they're behind on rent or whatever the case may be. And from our standpoint, we don't care if you're 6 months behind on rent, you know. The point is, the landlord still has an obligation to fix and repair things, you know, as called upon. And, you know, if they choose to let somebody live in a place without paying rent for 6 months, that's their option. They still have that responsibility to maintain their places and, you know, keep a healthy neighborhood. And we've seen outlets like this time and time again, you know. And that's, it could either be in a bedroom or in a hallway there, but that's definitely inside of a unit there, you know. So that's just kind of a small sampling. I mean, there's hundreds of them out there that we could kind of show you different things. I guess that was the last one, but I'm going to keep you guys here until 6:30.
I have a couple questions. Does anybody else have any questions?
I just have one that came in my mind a few minutes ago, Madam Chair, if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead, Godwin.
Very simple. Just looking at the presentation out there, one of the things that sort of popped in my head a few minutes ago is that hopefully by October 31st, the annexation will take place. Is this going to have a financial stress to Fitchburg in the sense that some of the things that you've highlighted, since they don't meet our specs, what are you going to do with landlords, and what do we, I mean, is there anything we are planning to do for landlords to bring their housing under what you call, under the code that we're looking for?
And just referring to the town of Madison properties you're asking about?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I think, like I said, I've been kind of going through there, and we'll make a fair assessment on those as we move forward. And from a curb appeal, none of them really look too bad over there, So I think the nice thing about it is a majority of, if I were to guess, 75 to 80% are owned by two different entities, which is going to make it a lot easier than chasing, 55 different owners and stuff like that. It's just going to make it so much easier. And then the other multi-units, there's just a handful maybe of ownership groups or just mom and pop operations. So, I mean, eventually we want to get in there and look at it and stuff, but, we're still going to kind of push the life and safety stuff or the deteriorating decks and what have you not. But we really want to get the word out that, to the tenants that, here's our expectations and here's your rights and responsibilities so that they know, but we also want to do the same for the landlords. So everybody's kind of on the same page and hopefully eliminate any calls and have them work together with each other, and realize that we don't want to get involved if we don't have to. And that's kind of the proactive approach I think we'll take at that, and it'll hopefully make things go a lot smoother than, going backwards.
Is there a budget constraint for the city as a result of this?
I can't answer the financial stuff on that. I really can't.
That's
So
fine. That's fair.
yeah.
Any other questions? Mallory, do you have a question?
I do. Is it possible to go back to the slide that talks about the housing mix? So you have a description of the current housing. So it was one of your first slides.
Okay.
It talked about the number of 2, 4, 6, and 8 unit versus larger properties. I was trying to get an idea.
Oh, that was this one right
go back
here.
To there you go.
And that should be present, I think, right? No.
So when you say for
do?
apartment,
There we go.
okay. So when you say for apartment, do you mean like four units?
So the way, yeah, when the multifamily, and it's kind of, assessing actually kind of assesses theirs different because they use 4 or more units. But from our standpoint, from a building standpoint, to be a commercial building or a multifamily is considered 3 or more. And I think that's why Amy added these 3 units in here, because that's all we have is, to my knowledge, is probably just 3 of those 3 units, So the 3 units are technically 9 dwelling units, so like a 3-plex, I guess would be a good term to use for that.
I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
I just thought there would be more
Of
like the 4 units and 8 units.
7,341?
No, I guess, no. I understand that there are larger multifamily complexes.
Right.
I'm just thinking about the Coho area. That's where I used to live
Sure.
35, 40 years ago. And there are quite a few, if I remember, 8 units, 4 units up in that area. I was just trying to get a handle on what that looked like versus the number of larger multifamily commercial, whether they be Section 42 or market rate.
Right. When I saw those numbers as well, Mallory, at the 7341 for just the 4 or more units, I thought it was low, but I talked to Amy about it. And then when I saw from 2000 through 2022, we had an additional 4,500. I still question that exact number there too, because I have a tendency to think it's higher, but we kind of went over the data that we have, and that number keeps popping back up.
So am I interpreting this correctly? There are 7 4-unit apartment buildings. There are 3 3-unit apartment buildings? Is that, or am I not getting it?
Let's see, 4 more units, 196 duplexes, which sounds about right for a total of 392. She threw in the
So
mother.
they're mostly duplexes.
Yeah, which one's that? I'm sorry.
I said it looks like they're mostly duplexes. That surprises me. I thought there were more 4-unit and 8-unit buildings. Just in that area in Coho, up by the Catholic Church,
Yep.
in that area.
I think it
That
would
just-
be,
What?
go ahead.
And that just surprises me. And I kind of wanted to,
Well-
I know you probably don't have a good handle yet, but what are those 800 units that we are going to assume? What does that look like?
Those
How
are all,
many-
those are all gonna be 4 units or more, and most of them are probably, without looking into it, they could be 20, 24, or maybe even 32 units, if, going by memory here a little bit.
Are most of the issues that you face when you're looking at these smaller ones, the 4-unit, the 8-unit, does that seem to be, I'm trying to imagine there's probably some 20-unit buildings over there. I haven't driven over there in quite a while.
In which part,
But where do you
Mallory?
see most of those issues? You said it's in the mom and pop.
Yeah, so mostly, I would say the biggest declining stock would be on the north side, up in that Coho Greenway area, except for, there's been some changes for the good over the last 3 or 4 years with some different ownership groups, and some upgrades, but not what you're gonna get, as new, obviously, because they have an investment that they have to get. And then, and then kind of the Thurston, Belmar, Red Arrow Trail area is kind of where those other multi-units are. The nice thing about that area, and it's been kind of a blessing, and I'll throw a name out there, is it J Rock? There's a development group, and they never really heard of them until I want to say about 7 years ago, and it started off with Chalet Gardens apartment complexes in Tacoma Heights. And then all of a sudden, they were just buying up everything over there. They got the big one, Belmar Apartments, and then they bought some of the 12 and 16 units right across the street. And they've been great. I mean, they've got security cameras up. I see them kind of remodeling the interiors, and I don't know the quality of that and stuff, but it's been a blessing over there, because some of those mom and pop operations that were across the street where we were getting close to going after a public nuisance for them and taking the buildings away because the conditions were that bad,
So who's the developer? You said it's called J-Rock?
J-Rock, is it? Mike or Joyce, can you help me with that one? Yeah.
So
So
Jack,
are they trying to amass it like a number so they can do affordable and they bring in an investor? I'm just kind of curious, do you know anything about them, what they're doing over there? No?
I do not, no,
Okay.
no. J.K. Rock, yeah. But they've always been responsive to anything that we've had. I mean, and the complaints are like nothing. We just don't get them. So it's been a blessing so far.
and Jack, with their acquisition and investment in the properties, is it carpet and paint, or are they completely doing kitchens and bathrooms, or what's the extent of their kind of investment in those properties?
I can't speak for all of them, but like over at the Belmar Apartments, I did see them pulling out a lot of the kitchen cabinets and the countertops and stuff like that. We were just talking the other day, we don't really require permits on those, and, we don't chase it, I guess, because we know that they're doing upgrades. We don't want it to be a deterrence, a money buster for them, not to do anything because it's gonna cost them from a permit standpoint, so. But yeah, I haven't actually seen an individual unit over there, and there again, because we haven't had any complaints.
Do you know how many units they have over there?
Oh my
Just
gosh.
out of curiosity, do you know how big it is?
Well, I was just gonna say, I'm looking at their website, so it says in Fitchburg, Belmar 3, Chalet Gardens, Guilford, and Tacoma Heights apartment homes. And those are studio 1 and 2 bedrooms in Madison, Meadowood Orchard Village, Randy's Rock, Rockville, and Woods Edge apartment homes. But Fitchburg, they have a pretty, right?
Right. Yeah.
There's some incentive, and I won't go into details, but there's some incentive in the tax code that allows a developer
I
to
don't
make
know.
energy efficiency improvements to a building envelope, and they'll get a $2,000 credit per unit. So you'll see, and a lot of developers will do this, you know, that helps them to make those improvements to those properties. And that section of the code, that's a federal credit, so that in general has been pretty consistent, and that in some ways facilitates that kind of investment.
Could be, and I think it's a group of 4 or 5 people that are involved in that, something like that. That's just what I've heard. But
Okay.
that neighborhood's, it's been better since they've gotten involved there, so, you know, no complaints at all.
Any other questions? Jack, I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
You said you didn't include the below average units, or were the below average units, or the ones that were in poor condition, were those in the below average numbers that you provided, the 119, or how many?
Yeah, there was actually only 3 listed in that whole list in that poor condition, and I think they were either studios or 1 bedroom, and I don't even know the location of them because of the way the spreadsheet was pulled out, you know.
Okay.
So,
But they were, you included them in the 119?
yes.
Okay. And it would be really interesting to kind of, I mean, I'm sure, or maybe this is not, it's probably an art and a science, but it'd be really interesting to see the criteria or the things, and I know, Joyce, you talked about the assessor having a definition which says, you know, is the, it's rated in relationship to the age of the unit and the wear for their age, but it would be really interesting to see, yeah, just some of the ways that that's evaluated, like in a, you know, a chart or a spreadsheet or something, just because, yeah. And then, you know, kind of the difference between average, good condition, poor, or, you know, below average and poor, just sort of to give me a kind of a, you know, reference point of what we're actually talking about. And then, what was my other question? I don't have it written down, so I'm not sure. I think that's it.
Olivia, I have a question for Jack.
Yeah.
Jack, in some of the situations, like with the pictures that you showed or other experiences that you have just visiting some of the units that have some issues, property maintenance and things like that, what has been the deterrence to getting those fixed up and corrected there? Is it, when you're talking to property owners and landlords, is it lack of resources? Is it they don't necessarily have a professional management or maintenance company? What have been some of the hurdles or issues with getting things corrected and fixed?
Well, I'd have to say most of it is, it's been more the single owners, mom and pop operations that have letting these run into the ground for probably a variety of reasons, whether it's, you know, lack of funds, lack of caring, potentially. I've seen that in the past. The larger management groups, and I'll backtrack here a little bit, because going back about 17 years ago, you know, we were having a lot of problems with several different apartment complexes here in Fitchburg that were really taking up a lot of time and resources, not only from our department, but police and fire as well. And it seems like there's some larger management groups that have taken over more properties, which has actually helped us out in a great deal because they knew what they were doing, and, you know, they had a they had a system down to, you know, make capital improvements and what have you not, so, but most of it, I think, is just lack of funding or just, they just plain don't care, you know, or they're absentee, so.
One thing that Jack kind of alluded to some years ago, probably 15, 17 years ago, we had some issues with some of our major multifamily apartment complexes, and I think we learned a lot from that experience. And one team that Jack is part of is our, I think it's called the Neighborhood Resource Team, that meets on, I think, a monthly basis now, and it includes building inspection, police, fire, administration, I think even legal is involved in that. And what they do is they kind of share information. So if Jack is kind of seeing a property that isn't being well maintained, he'll kind of bring it up to that group. Or maybe if the police department has noticed there's been a spike in police calls to a property, it might be an indication that maybe some tenant screening or criteria is lapsing a little bit, and it's more of a proactive approach to both property management and maintenance. So I think that's been a big help compared to 15 to 17 years ago, where we weren't as proactive in those areas. Looking for those early indicators.
I remember my question now. Jack, you mentioned earlier in your presentation that at some point here in the last few years, I can't remember when, you lost a building inspector. Has that person been replaced?
No, that happened in, I think 2014, so we were at 4 people, and, you know, and it was never really eliminated, it was just never replaced. And that comes back up on, for budget or council approval every year. But with Town of Madison, yeah, I try not to get into the politics of all that stuff and the finances, because there's so many needs out there for a lot of different departments here in the city, and it's kind of a pick and choose right now as far as prioritizing, especially with police, public works, you know, and the likes, but.
So since 2014, you've been down?
Yes, we had one individual retired in January of 2013, another one left in March of, so we were down 3, because they never, that was the assistant building inspector that retired. Yeah, that was his job title. They did not replace it that year, because I think we were still on just on the upswing of the economy and stuff like that. And then 2014, another guy had left for another job, relocated, and we replaced that. So we lost the position or never replaced it at that point.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I'm going to ask some of Jack, but he told me I wasn't allowed to, staff wasn't allowed to.
Yeah, this is where I
ask
sign
any
off. I
questions.
said staff could not ask any questions unless their name was Mike, but go ahead, Joyce, I'll answer your questions too.
So, you know, and I want to thank Jack, first of all, for, he was significant resource when we worked on our housing plan. I think he spent several hours with our consultants talking about apartments, housing in general. So I appreciate that, and he is always our go-to person. So from my standpoint, I want to thank you. But one of the things, Jack, we're working on is kind of programming for how we can best serve the residents out here. So some of the things we've been looking at is some of our peer communities and maybe financing programs and things like that. If we were to put something together for multifamily, what would be your suggestion? Would you think that we should provide like loans for mechanicals, loans for public safety? What do you think is the greatest need?
For the buildings themselves?
Yeah.
Well, I think mechanicals kind of probably take care of themselves, you know, over the course, because eventually they stop working, whether it's your hot water heaters or your boiler systems or whatever the case may be. I guess from my standpoint, it's more about, you know, a nice environment within the actual living unit, you know, that people can actually call home and not just a roof over their head. And then kind of life and safety. I mean, I would love to see, you know, upgraded fire alarm systems that, you know, are monitored and a better response time from the fire department. Sprinkler systems are pretty much out of the question. They're just too expensive to do that retrofitting and stuff like that. And it can't be pushed anyways. That would have to be a, owner's decision to do something like that, which we've had a few do that, actually. The bigger complexes gone in and retrofitted their building. New Fountains, I think, is one, if I remember correctly. So,
So did you, I just want to clarify, did you say public safety or health and safety?
Joyce or me? Just safety.
Either.
I think both, actually.
Uh-huh.
Both health and public safety. One of the things that's always kind of, and I'll get away from that for a minute, Joyce. We used to get a lot of calls about cockroach-infested buildings and bed-bug-infested buildings. I quite honestly, I have not had a complaint on that in years. And so it tells me one or two things. Either everybody's taking care of it and eradicating the problem, or two, the residents aren't calling us to let us know that there's an issue, making it a more widespread problem. And I don't know, I don't have the answer in that, and I can't really search it out, by knocking on doors and fishing for it, so they're out there. I trust that there's buildings that are having infestations of some sort. We just don't hear about it anymore, for whatever reason. But going back to Joyce, so energy efficiencies and, the public safety type stuff,
Hey, Jack, can I follow up on the public safety?
Absolutely.
Maple Lawn Apartments, when we worked with Royal Capital on the complete renovation of that property. And
Correct.
they qualified for WIDA tax credits on that one. But can you share with the group how they approached the fire safety sprinkler system? Because they did sprinkler that building, but they put it in soffits that run along the ceiling and the wall there, which was a more cost-effective way to retrofit one of those older buildings, but to bring it up to that kind of fire safety, life safety standpoint. Can you just share a little bit on that?
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, that building was not sprinklered at all. So they had to run a 6 or an 8-inch main into each individual building for them to be retrofitted for sprinklers. And then what they do is once they get the main line in there and stuff, they'll run the lines through the common corridors, and then they kind of zip them through the party walls per se, which would be the corridor walls, and then they would just run it around the footprint of the building, or like the living room, and then into the bedrooms and stuff like that. And then they would encase them to stop them from hanging their clothes on there and stuff like that. So it was a less expensive way for them to do that and keep everybody happy from, our standpoint and fire departments for sure. Mm-hmm. So, and we've had a few other buildings do the same thing where they've retrofitted from a main line, because we have a lot of buildings in the 80s and even late 70s that might have only been sprinklered in what we call the common areas, which would be storage areas and hallways, basically. And some of them were able to branch out into individual apartments I think the cost was about $8,000 to $10,000 per unit at the time, and then those were actually fully sprinklered buildings then at that point. So it is feasible.
And then, Jack, do you want to just tell the background on the properties along Greenway Cross that Banyan Management went in and completely redid those units with kitchens and bathrooms, and even, I think, put the stackable washers and dryers in that used to be down in the basement?
Yep. Yeah, we had the Banyan Group up at, it was 2 16-unit buildings up on Greenway Cross. I want to say it was the 2002 through 16 address over there. And that was kind of a single guy that owned those and stuff, and slowly getting depleted over there with funds, and he was one of those that didn't do any proper tenant screening or anything like that. So this group came in from Florida and bought it. I think it was almost sight unseen, basically, and paid well above what the value was on it. And they moved everybody out or relocated them into different units and pretty much gutted the whole basement area and got them so the basements weren't getting wet anymore, eliminated the storage, which creates a problem, for a variety of reasons. And then they resited everything, new windows, and they managed to somehow or another retrofit stackable washers and dryers in each unit because they wanted just one more amenity that a lot of these older housing stocks don't have. And they've sold recently here again, but it worked out, and no calls or complaints are coming from there either.
Any other questions, folks? Staff or other, or committee members? Well, Jack, thank you very much. That was very interesting, enlightening, and great food for thought. Appreciate your presentation and yeah, all the work you've been doing on behalf of the building inspection department. So thanks so much for coming. And,
Absolutely.
Yeah, we will go on to the next agenda item. And the next agenda item is a report from department.
We're continuing to work with Mike and Steve from H&A Advisors on the second phase of the rent-to-own.
Mike, we can't see you.
Can you see me now? No?
No?
There we go.
Oh, now we can
Yes,
see
I
you.
can. Yeah, we'll
Okay,
see.
now you can
And
see
we can
me.
also see Jack.
Okay.
And Jack, you're welcome to stay, of course, but you
I'm
don't
gonna
have
stick
to.
around for a minute.
That's good.
Okay, I was commenting that we're continuing to work with H&A Advisors on the next phase of our rent-to-own townhome program, and that's focusing on potential site areas. But one thing that we've come to the conclusion of working with Mike and Steve on that is maybe we need to accelerate some of the items like identifying a developer and a management company sooner rather than later, so that way they could be involved actually in that site selection decision. As we talked more about it with Mike and Steve and Joyce and I asked some questions, we thought it would maybe present some challenges later on if all of a sudden we're doing the site analysis and then we go and identify the developer and then they're trying to retrofit or make their project fit our site. And we thought that it might be better to have them involved and identify them on the front end. So having said that, the thing that it brings to light is that in our 2022 budget, we do not have the dollars currently identified in the budget to accelerate some of that additional consulting work for legal services. And then the outside legal counsel would help us draft those documents and RFPs for the developer and the management company. So Joyce and I just met with our finance director, Misty Dodge, today, and we will be approaching our elected officials about doing a budget amendment here in 2022 to bring some additional resources, which we have available. It's just that they're not allocated already within the 2022 budget, so we have to go through that process through our finance department. Then the other thing that we've done in working with Mike Harrigan and Steve Affelbach is we're working on our capital improvement plan right now, which will go for 2023, and it goes out 10 years to 2033. So we've put in now the full kind of cost and TIF participation for when we ultimately move forward with construction of a pilot townhome program. That will now, in fact, on Wednesday night is our appearance before the finance committee to start that process to include that full bucket of probably the $2.6 million of TIF resources that we have in the Affordable Housing Fund to bring that forward as part of our capital improvement plan. Our finance director wanted to have that submitted as one of the activity and action items there. So Mike and Steve were very helpful in putting that information together for us. So, and Joyce, why don't we send a copy of that, what we submitted, out to the Housing Advisory Committee? Yeah, we'll send that to you so you can see what was submitted for the CIP. But that gets it more into our process and queue there. This is kind of a new territory for us, and so we're kind of learning as we go along, and Misty's been very helpful in guiding us and letting us know kind of what we need to do to be in sync with the city processes here.
Mike, can you remind me how much the TIF will create for affordable housing?
TID number 6, it was about 2.63 or 2.67 from TID number 6 closure. There is going in now. And then next year, Olivia, we'll be closing the big TID number 4, which is here with the Promega campus and heading over to the interchange at Highway 14. And I think that gets us another $3 or $4 million that'll be going into the Affordable Housing Fund as well. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to have Jack come and start to give us his assessment of the condition of our existing multifamily, because as we work on our rent-to-own kind of pilot for an ownership kind of initiative, is there something that we should also be discussing and talking about when we're thinking about that older multifamily housing stock? Because that was one of the other priorities that was identified in our 2019 housing plan. One of the other objectives in that 2019 plan that we're making significant progress on is our senior housing inventory here. And it called in that plan for like 600 units that we needed kind of over the next 10 years. And I want to say we're probably already up to 450 units accomplishing that goal with the various projects that have already either opened, are under construction, or are planned in the pipeline.
And what percentage would you say are affordable senior housing?
Out of the 450, 160 of them are per the Section 42. And then we've got another 100, Olivia, coming with the Limerick as well. So 260 of them would qualify as affordable per the WIDA program and guidelines there, because we've got 160 on Fish Hatchery Road with the High Line, and then we've got 100 senior at the Limerick. The senior also has 30 family unit, townhome units as part of that project as well. But making good progress on the senior housing inventory across the board.
Yeah, sounds it.
If, so the Limerick is also section 42, or?
Yeah.
Oh, it is, okay. How's, if I can ask, how's the occupancy on Highline? Or on the one on Fish Edge? That was a kind of a slow
Yeah.
start, wasn't it, a little bit? It may have been for multiple factors, but.
Yeah, Brian's asking about the Highline senior housing on Fish Hatchery Road, and they opened at a tough time because it was during COVID, and then they also had road construction at the same time, so even just their potential population and residents even coming to look at the building was challenging while we were under road construction there. And then they also switched management companies, and I think once they switched management companies, that kind of helped to ramp up not only the leasing activity, but also the management of that property as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So last that we were there, when we had a meeting with them on site, I think they were over 90%. But one of the challenges, though, is with that kind of that 60%, you almost kind of have to allocate certain units to kind of, fit the pieces of the puzzle to kind of get to that 60% sweet spot there. So I think they were trying to identify those remaining residents to kind of meet the needs of that financial needs of that particular unit.
Right.
There, which gets a little tricky there at the end.
But it's exciting, I mean, to have that as part of the piece of Northern Fish Hatch. I mean, just think about the last 3-4 years, everything that's starting to happen up there with the banks, and then that's all market rate across Fish Hatch, right, from Highland.
Terrace Point. Yep.
I'm sorry, Terrace Point is all market rate. And, I mean, boy, we all see it all the time, so maybe we, kind of whatever, but it's really some good things coming there.
Yeah. It's interesting to get, as Brian said, sometimes we're a little too close to it.
Yeah.
We've had 2 different developers, I would say, within the last 6 months that hadn't driven down the Fish Hatchery Road corridor, and these are people that are in real estate development specifically, and one from Milwaukee hadn't been here for a while, and came and said, boy, you guys have really made significant progress in that whole Fish Hatchery Road corridor, not only with the road, but with the transformation of the various multifamily buildings, but with UW Credit Union Park Bank and everything, and really took note of that. And then one is a local developer here who hadn't been down that corridor in a while, and reaffirmed too, sometimes we get frustrated that we don't think we're making enough progress or fast enough there. And this person too came away impressed with how much progress we've already made in the corridor. And there's more projects in the pipeline. Some are public and some that we're continuing to work on at a staff level with developers up there.
It's exciting, though. I mean, it's good.
One thing I will report is, again, when we reconstructed Fish Hatchery Road and created the TID district up there, we hoped that if we reconstructed it, that the private sector would come and reinvest in that corridor.
Yeah.
But it was a big if at that point in time. But with the Oshala project that is coming now just to the east of UW Credit Union and the valuation that that should generate, we're confident that we will, that TID number 10 up there will cash flow. And we're going to be able to pay the bills for the reconstruction up there. So everything that comes forward after this point in time just adds to the vibrancy of that TID and gives us more resources to completely go in and transform that corridor that developed when we were still the town of Fitchburg into the city of Fitchburg of today.
That was a concern at the council too, I think.
Correct.
Right. I mean, a legitimate concern.
Yes.
Obviously, you know.
Joyce just reminded me too, Olivia, there was a new senior housing development, a couple-year-old, over in the Novation campus to Novation Commons, which was a joint venture, again, with WIDA and with Bear Development and Alexander Company over there. So we added some new housing stock in that neighborhood as well.
Great, thank you.
So
Does anybody have any questions of Mike or Joyce?
I was just gonna,
Just
I
a
was,
simple question.
Go ahead.
I've seen announcements in the media about the city of Madison meeting with people from the town of Madison. Are we doing something similar? What are we doing, just out of curiosity?
are you asking about meetings, Godwin?
Yes,
With
sir.
the town of
yes,
Madison?
sir,
Yes.
We're trying to get them in on October 1. I want to make sure that we welcome them well.
Yes, definitely. We had one, gosh, it was probably a month and a half ago, April, yes, that we hosted a welcome and information meeting. We were appreciative that Quartz Benefits actually hosted it at their office building. Had, I think, a really good turnout from residents and some of the businesses up there. And then just a couple weeks ago, we had one specifically for the businesses. That was a collaboration with our Fitchburg Chamber of Commerce, and it was a kind of networking that we did at the Delta Beer Lab. And we had another really good turnout for that with the businesses. And then going forward monthly now, June, July, and August, in September, our Town of Madison team is going to be having an event each month over there in the Novation campus, Southdale neighborhood, to engage with the residents going forward. And then we will also be having a more business-targeted event again in September as we get closer to the official date of October 31st of 2022. And then we've got a website, a page on our website that continues to get populated with updated information and answers to the frequently asked questions that we've been getting. So we've been doing a lot of outreach. One of the big things that came up at the initial meeting with the residents was the Madison Metro route reconfiguration, redesign there. Yeah, and we did some outreach, I know, working, and we even hosted a follow-up meeting specifically on transit and the redesign of routes at the Doxa Church over there as a follow-up to that meeting.
I was going to mention, and that's an issue that has got a little discussion in the city too, at Madison. There's quite a bit of discussion about those route changes, I guess, as one would expect. I was going to mention too, and I thought I had in my notes here for the minutes, but was it on one of your documents or whatever, there was, WIDA is doing, 3 online workshops? One of them was on general home ownership, I think, and then 2 of the other ones were on WIDA on tax credit programs or something. And if people have the opportunity to dial into those, I think we can just sign up to those online. Is that right? Those are interesting to see. I mean, when I was at WIDA, we used to do those, and it's even if you've been through them before, it's a good refresher because things change. But those are good workshops. If you can dial into them, you learn a lot. And as things change, and they have changed several programs over there, it's kind of good. I'm going to do it just to dial into what kind of changes they've done over there. So,
Mike, just out of curiosity, is there any media entity that you work with so that the information is disseminated? Because I saw an invitation from the city of Madison, which was in a local a local newspaper. So I'm just wondering, I know you might have constraints from your budget, but we need to let people know what we're doing.
No, we did a mailing actually to all households and all businesses, that we did direct mailing to them just to make sure that we didn't miss anybody. And then we even had
I didn't
part of
get
our,
one, so you missed me.
what's that?
I didn't get one, so you missed me.
This was in the town of Madison.
Ah, sorry, okay.
Yeah, it was a direct mailing to all the town of Madison, future Fitchburg residents and future Fitchburg businesses, specifically inviting them to the information and welcome session. And then working with the chamber, we did another one specifically to the businesses for that event. And then we've been kind of populating our database for continued outreach to the neighborhood. So we tried to do as much as we could, as direct as we could, and then, utilize social media, and Fact TV has been a great partner with helping to get the word out, and they'll be there at all these monthly events that'll be going between June and September going forward.
Godwin, just so you have an idea, I know for sure at the citizen event, there was at least 3 larger property owners there, multifamily, and at our networking event at Delta Beer Labs, we had 3, I think, also apartments owners there, and one is probably, he's got the biggest complex, and he was there, and Mike and I both had a chance to chat with him, as did some other department heads. So we've really opened up the line of communication with the apartments. And then we also made phone calls to a lot of the business community, as well as the apartments. So we've been doing a lot of outreach. We'll be going out door to door as it gets closer and gathering information. And just doing a personal introduction. So we've been busy.
And I just have a final question. Joyce and Mike, how do you anticipate using the information that Jack prepared for us today? What do you sort of see as some next steps?
I'm going to turn that one over to Joyce because she was part of your latest DCHI meeting, Olivia, and I know she's got some thoughts maybe about the next step in the conversation.
So if you recall, back in December, I had sent out a bunch of different programs from communities all over as ideas for us. And then I believe in March, we kind of all took our turns talking about, okay, what we felt were the priorities and programs that we should look at. So what I need to do next is I want to get more details on Madison's programs and share them, because they had some interesting ideas. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to see because of technical difficulties, to actually see the program, so I want to do a little bit more research. But I want to get back to, figuring out what we want to do as far as our multifamily. That's really important that we look at some ways to address that. And then it's going to be not only what kind of programs we want to do, how we want to provide information to the property owners. I think, I have ideas of things we might want to do as far as a list of resources. Jack mentions energy efficiency. There's programs out there that can help. It's just figuring out the best way to move forward.
Right. And are you familiar with the work that Elevate Energy and Sustain Dane are doing with upgrading? They're doing energy efficiency evaluations and doing some upgrades in some pilot projects in Madison. Or are they working in Fitchburg too? I can't remember.
I believe we met with them and we introduced them to Jack a while back. And, I don't know where we're at with that whole thing. Did they ever follow up with you, Jack? They hadn't followed up. You know, it's really hard for us to make recommendations, and I think that's what they wanted, for us to give them names. And, you know, if it's easier for them to say, we've identified this project, can you provide us with information, than us saying, you need to look at this project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So that was kind of our hopes, is that they would say, oh, you know, we did a drive around, and we think these properties might be good ones for us to investigate. You know, there's the PACE program, there's, you know, Focus on Energy, there's all sorts of different programs out there, but we need to figure out a way to compile that, explain it, and share it. And that's going to have to be something that is kind of a joint effort amongst departments.
Right. Now, could they just call the building inspection department and?
I don't think building inspection really has the resources to stay on top of that.
Right.
You know, it's hard. There's programs are changing every day as far as what's out there. So it's, like I said, it's going to have to be a joint effort between all departments. You know, we need to share information with the seniors. We need to share information with building inspection, with our department. It crosses many departments.
Right, and then separately, you want to continue to review the options and priorities for
Right.
programming or grant, right?
You got it.
So any other questions or comments, thoughts? Well, thanks again to Jack and Joyce and Mike for all your work, and the update, and committee for all your questions. And actually, Joyce, I do have that presentation. I just got it from WIDA, so I'm about to send it out to the DCHI group. So you'll have the contact information and some program information from what the city's doing.
Great, thank you.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you so much, everybody. Meeting adjourned.